All right, today we will be discussing humans in space. So we're going to look at the identification of accommodations, considering the characteristics of our solar system that allows for space exploration. So let's start off with the first essential question, which is what are conditions like in space? So conditions in space. Space is a vacuum, which means there's no atmosphere and also no sound. Temperatures in space are extremely hot or extremely cold, depending. And then objects and people in space experience a feeling of weightlessness or microgravity. It's not zero gravity because technically there's some gravity, but very 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 little. So here are some effects of being in space on human body. So ions in space can cause radiation that can cause cancers. Probably not good. Earth has one G-force. Space has varying G-forces, which can cause muscle loss, which is muscular atrophy, heart rhythm dysfunction. Probably not good because you need that heart to pump that blood. Vision and heart impairment, and also balance problems at equilibrium. So without the force of gravity to work against, astronauts in space, they have to find ways to exercise to slow the loss of bone and muscle. Just a fun fact here, bone loss occurs at a rate of 1 to 2% a month, which is kind of scary. Recap time number one. All right, so what are conditions like in space? What are some conditions? And then what are some effects on humans when in space? So what are the effects of space on the human body when they're up there doing what they do? All right, so how do astronauts train for a mission, and how do they train for a mission? It can take up to 2 years to become a fully qualified, trained, amazing astronaut. And then the candidates must learn the basics of the space shuttle and the ISS, International Space Station. They must also learn how to be a part of a team, so how to communicate and work together. And also they have to learn different languages because International Space Station, there's going to be different, languages going on up there. So when did the first humans go to space? So in the 1950s, after World War II ended, U.S. and Soviet Union competed, Soviet Union, also known as Russia, to see which country could make advances in space exploration the fastest. This was called the space race. As you can see, Buzz Lightyear is killing Woody over there. Space race. Okay, so in 57, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, which was the first satellite in space. Then they launched Sputnik 2, the first manned satellite to orbit the Earth. Pretty amazing. And in 1958, the USA created the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, also known as NASA, and the space race was in full swing. What could happen next? All right, so then in 1969, the U.S. landed the first man on the moon, Apollo 11, achieving a notable victory in the space race. Neil Armstrong was the first man to walk on the moon. Most of us know that. Recap time number two. So when did the first humans go to space? And what was their mission? Pretty simple. All right, so how do we travel to space? So a space shuttle is a reusable spacecraft that can carry a crew and equipment into space and return that to Earth, and then be reused. So most shuttle missions last an average of 9 days. So where can we currently live in space? Where do we live when not on Earth? A space station, which is the International Space Station, allows long-term observations and experiments to be carried out. Most astronauts stay on the space station for 4 to 6 months. Remember, bone loss, muscle loss, can't stay up there too long. So here's a picture of that beautiful International Space Station, kind of showing the different parts and how it works. Recap time number three. So how do humans travel to space, and where do they currently live in space? Interesting. All right, so what do astronauts wear in space, and how does it protect them? So they have a spacesuit, which allows people to be outside of a spacecraft. How does it protect the astronauts, you might ask yourself? So a lack of oxygen and severe temperatures that exist in space, debris flying through space, drifting off into space by attaching tethers, and then helmet, which protects against UV rays, gives oxygen to breathe, allows communication to the shuttle because no sound travels through space, and visors covered with a thin layer of gold. Pretty valuable. So here's a picture of that pressure suit and helmet, also known as spacesuit. So there's a guy wearing it there. Not sure his name. Looks like a cool cat. And then you have all the little things that it does. So you have the oxygen supply hose, visor. You can read all of that. I don't really need to read it to you. All right. So what do the astronauts use on board? So astronauts use exercise equipment on the shuttle and International Space Station to provide friction and weight on muscles and bones. Since there's no gravity, remember, muscular atrophy, the muscles wear away, bones 1 to 2% bone loss. Whew, that's not great. So freeze-dried food and liquids in bags provide nourishment and keep eating from being messy, because with the microgravity, food's going everywhere. And then there's special suction toilets to keep waste from flying around, because that would be gross. And then astronauts sleep attached by Velcro to the wall. So here's some pictures. Got some people exercising, lady doing some treadmill work there. This guy's doing some squats. Maybe get a little lower on that squat, sir. But other than that, pretty good. They have some fine astronauts here eating. They have secured some of their food, but it looks like some tomatoes have worked their way around. Also a picture of some Dippin' Dots up there, because let's be honest, they're delicious. Some guys sleeping. Maybe there's a lady down there. Looks like, yes. They're just Velcroed, making sure they don't drift off into, bump their heads and interrupt their precious sleep. So here's some inventions in space. So baby food, smoke detectors, water filter, cordless tools, handheld vacuum cleaner, memory foam. Gotta love that for your mattress. Inner ear thermometer, scratch-resistant glass, shoe insoles, a super soaker, and camera phones. Wow. Couldn't go without that iPhone. Recap time. What accommodations are necessary for humans to travel in space? So how can space travel be possible? What do they need? And name some inventions that have been born due to space travel and exploration. Who wants to go to space? So now that shuttles have been retired, how are we going to get to space? Private companies are competing to produce the next space vehicle that will take average people to space as often as they fly in a plane. Pretty amazing. So SpaceX and Merlin are a couple of those private companies. Recap time. Final one, number 5. Here we are. What are some pros, positive, and cons, negative, that could result from private companies bidding for new space vehicles? So just thinking about that, how could that be a pro or a con as we get further and further into private space travel?